Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to show you how to do some Photoshop touch-ups on some post-production, if you will, on your renders or your scene. And I've got a file here that I didn't render it, I just took a screenshot. I didn't want to wait. This is an in-scene view of a model of an indoor environment that I've done. I never completely finished it, but it's enough to go ahead and show you some things that we can do to improve it. A lot of things we can play around with. First of all, filters are, I don't want to say they're bad, but I don't want to say that they're not useful. As far as most of them, if you're doing an outdoor scene, I really like the lens flare. You'll be able to adjust where the light's coming from. If I had like a I don't know, someone was seeing the light, I guess, if you will, in this scene, because I have this really gory scene, maybe that would come into handy, and then you get this really cool effect. That's one of my personal favorites in Photoshop as far as filters go for post-production, that I can think of at least right now. Other things you can do is you can do hand-drawn manual things, and you can also really easily play around with, you could do it up here, image adjustments, and you can start messing around with hue, saturation, color balance, a photo filter. Here's another. Ooh, I have nothing on that scene. Let me duplicate this one so I keep the original. I always like to keep the original, by the way. Image adjustments, what did I say? Photo filter. Photo filter. This can be useful. You can increase it to give it a little bit more of a, I think when you use something like the photo filter, I always think of this being a sort of way to reminisce on a past memory or a flashback or something like that. It just gives you that feel, that orange kind of warming filter. There are a whole bunch of other ones you can mess around with. But this one in particular, the default one, gives you sort of this flashback kind of memory kind of, at least in my opinion, feeling when you look at it. Now back to the hand-drawn things, and then I'll cover things such as hue, saturation, and so on and so forth. But you can do a lot just with just manually drawing in things into your scene. And I typically use just really, I'll do some lighting effects, and I'll switch my blend layer to a soft light, and then it really depends on where the light source is coming from, and if I'm going to do, let's say, some highlights or something, just say I want to get some more highlights in here, and that might even be a little too bright. Actually, maybe I want to go with a little darker of a gray. I don't know, something like that. And I'm getting a little, actually, more of a shadow feel here. Let's go a little bit lighter. Let's try it again with a actual smaller brush. Alright, maybe too small. And I'm going to start to just sort of, I should probably zoom in. And I don't have any of the, this is all just one flat little layer here, and I'm just going to sort of draw in a little bit of a highlight here right around the edge. This is how you can sort of simulate, just erase a little bit. Ooh. Sort of simulate backlighting, if you will. Ooh. And I don't want a hard brush. That might have been my problem. I'll do one more. Hide this one. and just kind of run up, and change my blend mode to soft light. Soft light's one of my favorites. Multiply is a good one also, and I can just start to get a subtle little highlight right around the edge, and this could sort of simulate a backlight that you may have not been able to get to work the way you wanted it to. And pretty much every 3D artist will utilize Photoshop in one way or another to sort of here we go, just give it a softer sort of fade out. And so I've got this subtle little highlight. Ooh, I didn't mean to go too harsh on that. Highlight here along the edge of my bedpost here. I could also do the same thing on this end. Seems kind of right because I've got it happening on one. I might as well have it happen on the other. And I'll just sort of subtly draw this in. And I don't want to go too far with this. I'm not. I don't want to. You got it, just as long as you sort of get the idea. And then I'm going to just sort of brush that out a little bit and go back in here. So that's one way to sort of create your own little touches on lighting. So that just covers highlighting. We can also cover shadows. You could always do this on a separate layer if you want. Let's just say along the bedpost here, and don't forget to change this to your soft light. Ooh. I find this to be a really great, and if black is too dark, as I was showing you before, you switch to kind of a gray and you get a little bit more of a subtle shadow. I'll just run across the bottom of this here, and maybe even right down here and here, and I'm just sort of. Now the scene that I have right here literally doesn't have any lighting in it. I had just basically I took a screenshot of the viewport in perspective mode. You can actually see it right here in the little XYZ thing here. Alright, and then I could always do something else. Oh, here we go. Go back, go to this layer. If I'm going to be really nitpicky about my layers, do something like that. And you can start to get some really neat effects going. And I'm switching to my eraser. I think you may have already known. I'm pressing E for my eraser, and I'm just going to go in here, and especially because I have no lighting in here, this could really improve the overall quality of this still frame render. Could switch to black, go to this layer, and let's just say this one's darker. I mean, I'm really just kind of, I'm not really thinking too much. I'm just kind of going with it. And then a little bit down here. And also maybe I get some shadow work, I don't know, over here. And then maybe there's a subtle sort of shadow down here. And then I can switch back, go to my highlights, and maybe I run just a quick little, see what happens here. And I'm gonna sort of just run this subtle little erase here, because I don't want it to be too strong. Of course I could always bring it down. Just want to make sure that people can kind of see that. Let's see. A little bit more highlights here. It's easier actually to do some of the highlights in here because it's sort of like this dark grungy kind of scene. Switch to my shadows. This side seems like it'll be highlighted. This side seems like it should be darker. Okay, something like that, and then I'll switch to my white. Go back here, and you can always adjust the shadow of your do something like that, and I'm going to just briefly touch it right there. I'm just going to briefly sort of soften up that edge with my eraser real quick. Now, if I turn off these layers, what I'll do is I'm going to press Control J and Control E, and then I'm just going to hide these two. I'm going to delete this one originally. Oh, and I need to make sure this is on soft light. And you can actually start to see, actually while I've got it here, where I've drawn in some of these highlighting lines and things. My grays here, my whites here, my highlights. And I'm going to go soft light. And you'll see when I toggle it on and off, you start to get more of a... It really changes the lighting on this one. It shifts from one side to the other, actually. So you can really get some cool effects out of it. Let's see. Some other things we can always mess around with. I'll go to the actual background, or the image, the original image, and I can go ahead in here and do adjustments. I can mess around with the brightness and the contrast. I could use legacy. If you turn it off, it goes to default. They really just kind of work on their own sort of. I don't know the difference too much between legacy and the other one, other than they really do look a lot different. In this case, I prefer not using legacy, and then I can bring down my contrast or bring up my contrast if I want. I think having a higher contrast in this scene is more, in this particular scene, a stronger sort of imagery. And then what else? I can do some other adjustments, and I will do my hue saturation. Now if I wanted it to be more of a gray, bring down my hue, or my lightness. I want to dull it up a bit, make it more of a black and white. I bring down my saturation. And then if I really want to just get crazy with the coloring, I can mess around with my hue here. Adjustments. You can run an auto tone. I don't know if that's... I'll stick with it. You can do all these different things here. Not necessarily saying they're good or bad, but you don't have any options to change once you use that auto change, or whatever you want to call it, auto contrast color. And let's see, exposure. We can adjust the exposure of it as if it were in a camera lens, the offset, the gamma correction, and let's see. And you can do these. I'm just really just kind of throwing some out here. Shadow highlights, and it will try to atone for what you got here. You can up the highlights. Oop. Something like that. I'll press OK. Let's see. HDR toning. Let's try it. I can always undo it probably. And I definitely do not like that. You could probably change just by toggling some different surrealistic. I don't like that at all. So this may not be that great of an option with that. The desaturate, obviously black and white. Levels is always a good one. I probably should have covered that one earlier. This covers sort of a brightness contrast kind of thing. And then you can always really get some really cool little effects out of this. I really like the levels. Increase contrast. Let's try 3. Okay. Mid-tone's brighter. And you can really get some cool things out of it. Now, one other thing I would like to show you that could be really useful. I got my highlights off and then on. One thing that might help, I like this tool, the Gaussian Blur, in which case I'll bring it to... In this case, it could help a lot. Let's see, zoom out. See, I want to blur. What I'm doing is, instead of having these harsh lines that I drew in, if I want to soften them up so they're not as they have that sort of lighting to it, I press OK, and they should soften up a little bit. It might be hard to see, but it does certainly help, and it can help really well, and especially for that particular reason, to sort of soften those edges like I was trying to do with the eraser at first. Other than that, I want to go ahead and show you, that's just in Photoshop, sort of some ways to adjust your scene. Other than that, I want to go ahead and show you in Maya. I was going over some things with the effects, and let's just say in this particular scene I wanted to, and I'm just going to simply assign new material, because I'm going to make this one assign new material. There we go. And I'm going to go to not a blend, I want it to be a Lambert, and then I'm just going to bring my transparency all the way up, and then I'm going to go to my effects, and I'm going to do fire, and then I'm going to play my animation. Okay, and we did the smoke, so maybe if I open that file, I'll show you. We can add some smoke in our scene. Let's go ahead and do a render. We'll just switch to our rendering tab. Render current frame. I'm going to check my render settings really quickly, and I'm going to switch this to my software, because I don't believe the render current frame, that Arnold will render the fire or the flame. So from here, I'm going to do a file, save image, and Photoshop tips, and here I'm going to do fire. Ooh, of course, I saved it as a JPEG. I meant to save it as a PNG. So I'm saving this out as a PNG, Fire Maya. And now I'm going to go back into my Photoshop. I'm going to open up my scene, and I believe this is the PNG with the white background. Okay. I probably could actually, even just mentioning it, if I open up this one, and I'll duplicate this layer, and I will do a screen maybe. Oh, I gotta hide this one first. Nope, not screen. Multiply. Nope. I think there's a way that, I think there's one of these that will totally get rid of the black background if you mess around with these blends. Trying to think which one it is. Maybe is it overlay? I don't remember. I'll create a white background just to see. And here, probably not overlay. Screen? No. Difference? Could be. I don't know. Anyway, I'll go back to this one. I'm going to press Control A, Control C, and then I'm going to go in here and go Control Shift V, and we'll see that we have our little flame that we rendered out. I could put this anywhere, not like it fits in this particular scene at the moment, but just to show you that I could include some things like that. And let me zoom out real quick. I'll just put it at like the bottom, and then I don't know, something. I don't know if I like that, but you get the idea. So you can include these scenes that you can render and composite into your scene. I'm going to go back in here, exit out of this, oop, and file open, and I'm going to run through one more. We'll do, I don't know, smoke 2 sounds good. and I'm going to play this for some frames. That looks pretty cool. And then I'll just zoom in a little bit and I'll do a render current frame. This one might take a little bit longer to render. And this smoke is looking pretty thick, so let's see if it'll actually be transparent in the Maya scene. You can tell that my resolution on it isn't the sharpest, but that's because if you want a higher resolution, if you want a higher resolution, you're going to want to up that, and then it will turn out to be a better quality image. If you go back to that lab that we did, you'll be able to find it. Now I will go to in here, we'll do smoke, Maya, and this is called compositing, what we're doing right now. And I'm going to Control O and open up smoke Maya, press open, Control A, Control C, I saved that out as a PNG by the way, Control Shift V, and now you'll see that I have my smoke here. I'm going to resize it. I know this really has like nothing to do, this fire and smoke in the scene, and then I'll change this one to maybe not overlay, maybe soft light, and maybe nothing. Maybe I just bring it to a normal, or one more, maybe multiply. Multiply is always a good one. Kind of. It actually adds a pretty cool shadow on the background. But I'm gonna go with normal, and then I'm gonna go ahead and bring down my opacity just enough so it can be seen as smoke, but just also so you can see through it. And obviously I would have found maybe a better frame of that smoke that I liked. And now I'm starting to composite my entire scene together. This is a really important thing in animation as well as 3D modeling. When doing Photoshop touch-ups, you can really make a impactful difference on your scene. Or maybe I want it over here, I don't know. Anyway, that's all I've got so far at the moment that I can think of on compositing and Photoshop touch-ups. What I want you to do for your assignment is I want you to take your current scene, I want you to take a render or a screenshot of the scene, whatever you think is, you know, the better option for this particular project or lab, excuse me, and I want you to just composite in fire and smoke, okay, that we've done together in this class. And then I also want you to go ahead and I want you to try include some highlighting and lighting, highlighting and shadows like I did with this particular render. I would like you to try to do that. I will be taking your Photoshop files to view, and then another thing you can always play around with, even this fire or the smoke here, you could try play around with some filters. In particular, I'll just click on this one. You could, if you wanted to try to do something more adjustments, if you wanted to try play around with the photo filter again, I think this can be really super useful. If I bring this up, or maybe I bring it to a cooling filter, or you can do whatever you want with it. And I want you to submit, when the final is due, I want you to submit one totally final render of your scene with Photoshop touch-ups to make the quality of your image as high as possible. And yeah, that's about it. If you have any questions, be sure to message me. And thanks for watching. And I look forward to seeing your projects. Thank you so much, and be talking to you soon.